Hi, Abby.
Hi.
How you doing?
Since I'm teaching in this specific space, I need to figure out what's a good angle.
I know.
Give me a second.
Wait, oh, it's a little. I can't. If you're a little. Also, your volume's. It might be on my end. I don't know, but it's a little low. Let's see.
How's it now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
It's good. Okay.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Should I start letting people in or wait a few
Sure.
minutes?
I don't see why not. I'm gonna mute myself until we start, but I will share the as soon as people start entering, I will share the link and the like PDF so people could
Perfect.
like start looking. Yeah. I will mute myself until 7:30.
Hi, Jody. Hi. Good evening. We're we won't get started for another 8 minutes or so. So
Sounds good.
okay. Thank you. Abby, I'm gonna make you co-host so you can. There you go. Yeah. Good. So you can screen share your stuff better. Let me just look at one thing.
Let me try it just to make sure it's working.
There we go. It's good. Mm,
Okay, we're good to go. I'm gonna mute myself again until
okay.
7:30. Hi, Jody.
Happy. Hi. You have to forgive me for misspelling your name. I thought it was with an I instead of a Y.
It's okay.
So sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. I'm looking for a song that I wanted to play before we start, so I'm gonna keep looking, see if I find it. But we'll start in a few minutes. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my. Okay.
Happy Nowruz and almost happy vernal equinox.
Happy Nowruz.
So Susan, I think we're only. I think that 40. The list that Itamar sent me has 42 people. So should we wait a few more minutes, or should we like start? What do you think?
You can wait a minute or two,
Okay.
sure.
We'll wait to 7:35. I don't expect
Yeah.
everyone to come anyway, but yeah, we'll wait until 7:35 now. Okay.
Or if you had some music you wanted to start with, that could be too.
I think I'm gonna play a few minutes of a very very specific song. We'll see how see how people react, and it will come in later. It's gonna be from something that's gonna come in later in the class today. Just share the music as well. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to say the same thing I say always when we start, that I encourage everyone who feels comfortable to turn on their video. I always say I don't care what you're wearing as long as you're decent, whether you were dressed to go to a wedding or you're wearing a bikini, I think we're fine. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable sometimes if they're just wearing like PJs or some house clothes. Like, truly, we love you and we love to see your faces. It really doesn't matter how you're dressed. So, given I think we're still small enough-ish to maybe do some intros. Um, this is like only like we have over 40 people registered. I know a lot of people just like register and then watch the class later, which is great and amazing. But I want, for those of you that are here, if you feel comfortable, we'll do a quick go around and just say our names. I will do our names, pronouns. Let me know if you were not here, if you were here or not, either way, at our last session, which was 4 weeks ago. And tell me one thing you are hoping to get out of this class. Or not get out of this class. I don't know if that makes sense. Just one thing that you are coming in. Try to keep it to one sentence if that's possible, but like one sentence about what you are hoping, or let's put it this way, one sentence about why are you here? What brought you into this room tonight? So my name, I will start. My name is Abby Stein. I use she, her pronouns. I am a rabbi and I'm the scholar in residence this year at the new Shul. For those of you who are in case, and if you're unaware that this is part of the new Shul, this is already the 5th direct class that I'm teaching, but it's the 2nd in our series of Kabbalah 101, which are Kabbalistic texts through a modern lens. And it is kind of a class that came out from our Hasidic text through a modern lens class, which we did in the winter, though it's not directly related to it. And I am really excited for today's class because a lot of I apologize for the wording, but I couldn't think of a better word to use. But a lot of the texts that I have in today's source sheets are virgin texts to me, and I mean in the sense of I haven't taught them in public. I think every other text that I've used so far has been very much like things that I have taught in public before. Today, it's all like familiar topics, but it's a bit of new text, and I'm very excited for that. So let's go around. I will just call out on screen names of the way I'm seeing them on my computer. And let's try to keep it brief so we can dive in. If I remember correctly from last time, there's a lot to get through. So Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Myers. I'm the executive director of the new Shul, and it's wonderful to see so many familiar and new faces. And I'm here just because my primary thing is that I adore listening to Abby teach. Rabbi Abby teach. So,
Thank you. Abby is fine.
pleasure.
Thank you. Barbara.
Yeah,
Barbara, unmute.
my name is Barbara. And I just want to learn. I mean, no matter what it is, I mean, I want to learn, about the history of my people, the religion. I'm studying the language. I just want to learn as much as I can. So
It's amazing. That's what synagogue, like, really, specifically, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking because like shul, which is the Yiddish word, or we would say shiel, literally just means school. Like, it became the word for synagogue in Yiddish, and then later a lot of people use it in English as well. But really, at its core, it just means learning. It means school. So that's amazing. Thank you, Don.
Hi, I'm Don, he, him. I'm here to learn and hopefully to learn just enough to use the powers of Kabbalah to vanquish my enemies, whether real or imagined.
I love that. Love it. I don't think we're going to cover in Kabbalah. There's something that's called Kabbalah Masiot, which means like practical Kabbalah, which is the belief by a lot of people that you can like of how to use in Kabbalah to literally do stuff in the world. I don't think we're gonna get to that, but maybe if we keep teaching, maybe we'll get to that eventually. But I do not take responsibility that they will actually work. But we can try. Thank you, Joni.
Hi, Jody Vanderhyde, she, her.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry,
No,
did
I
you mean
meant
me?
Joni, but go for it.
Oh,
You know what? Go
sorry,
for
I'm
it.
so
No,
sorry.
it's fine. It's fine. Go for it.
All right.
And then we'll go to Joni after. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jody with the D, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm trying to make Judaism a bigger part of my life again. I kind of I mean, I still kept going to shul, but I mostly put things on hold while I was transitioning, and now I'm on the other side of that, and I want Judaism to be a bigger part of my life, so I'm here to study and learn.
Amazing. You're gonna love the next session, which I think is in 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember exactly. I have to check the calendar, but you're gonna love that one even more. But today as well. But that's gonna be a lot about putting Kabbalah into our day-to-day lives and how that looks. And there's gonna be a lot about just because of the work that I do. There will be a lot about transitioning and finding yourself and so on. So thank you, Joni. Yes, with an N.
Hi. Sorry for my scrapey voice. Joni, he, her, Zozika, she, her, they, what. Yep. And I'm in this class because I'm very, very interested in Kabbalah, but also because I'm going to be doing a mitzvah, and I think that that's something, it's an element of what I'm looking at, a large element actually of what I'm looking at in terms of my portion or whatever. And so it's great. I'm just so excited about this class. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Amy.
Hi, I'm Shane. He, him, or oh,
No, go ahead. It's fine.
oh,
It's
sorry.
fine. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
I'm Shane. He, him, or they, them both work. I second the earlier one of trying to get much more into Jewish study again after transitioning, since I'd kind of had a few gap years there, and also just really excited to delve deeper into Kabbalah. I've wanted to do that for years, and my roommate Chedva, she is also listening in.
Love that. Thank you so much. Who was it? Amy. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was talking and talking, but I was
No.
muted. So
Oh,
anyway, Amy Goldfarb, she, her. I love learning. Also, I think I'd like to find at least one thing that I can really understand and use in Kabbalah that I can really integrate into the way I see my world and my life and
I think
other.
you're gonna like. Hopefully, even if you don't get through all the text today, but we're gonna have one example, which is actually Shabbat, because that's a very big one and it's something we do a lot. So there'll be like one example of how that looks. Will be today. So hopefully we get there and you like it.
Thank you.
Joy.
I'm Joy from Minneapolis, she, her, and I've been teaching Kabbalah for years, but I love how other people teach, and I know I'm going to be fascinated by what you bring to this. So, and I'm having my second bat mitzvah, I'm going to be 83 on May 11th. Reading Torah.
I love that. And yeah, you were with us last time as well, and I really, I think it puts me on my toes a bit to like have someone who knows, but in a good way. I love it, and I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, so that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Hadar and child. Sorry, I think. Oh, go for it.
Takes me a second to figure out how to unmute. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Hadar Nesta. I'm tuning in from Toronto, Canada, actually. I just saw this online and wanted to join. I'm looking for some more Jewish spark in my life.
And who's that next to you?
Oh, and this is Rafi Shoshana. Want to say hi? And Rafi's co-parent is coming home soon, so I might tune in and out until they get here. I use she, her, and they also feels good.
Amazing. Well, it's really beautiful to have I love all the generations we have here. It's so beautiful. It warms my heart. Susan.
Is that me? Am I the
Yeah.
only Susan here?
Oh, yeah, no, the other Susan already went.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. So I basically am here because I love the new Shul and the Chevrutahs, and I watched the recording from the 101 Kabbalah from last month, which I was really impressed by. And for reason I am here in general is because I want to be able to take in all that Judaism has to offer. So the deeper this more spiritual, the more knowledge and understanding. I just want it all. So
Thank you. Shana, Ezra, are you here? So we're reaching out to people who don't have their videos on, so I don't know who just signed in and who's actually here.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm here. I would love to have my camera on, but my computer will crash if I do so. Hi, they, them pronouns, and I am here because Kabbalah fascinates me, and I want to absorb as much information as I can and see what resonates from my upbringing and my Reformed Jewish education, what sounds familiar.
Amazing. Rain, are you here? Rain, are you here?
Hi, yes, sorry. Was having a challenge unmuting.
Don't worry.
Hi, my name is Rain. My pronouns are they, them, baby Yiddish learner, as they. And I attempted to attend the last session, but there was a giant storm passing through here that knocked out our internet and electricity. And so I attended like the first 5 minutes and then lost it.
Did you watch the recording?
I would love a recording. Actually, I didn't know if there was recording happening, and I was hoping that there would be, because also I will probably have to leave early today. So I would love to have recordings if that's a possibility. And I'm joining in a distilled fashion, I would say. I was raised, my dad was an Orthodox rabbi, and I was raised in a very oppressive form of Judaism. And as a trans person, I'd say I'm trying to salvage what bits are like, actually good about the traditions of our collective ancestry, and that this seems like one of the best ways to seek that out by having the opportunity to learn from a trans rabbi.
Oh, thank you so much. I will say about the recording for you, and I see a few other people also asked about the recording. They usually send the day after. So like if you signed up, you should have gotten, just check in your emails, you should have gotten them. But also if not, we can always send it. But usually it usually will come from Itamar the day or 2 days after the class. You will also get a recording, so you have access to it and you can rewatch that. Yanko, are you here?
Hello, I'm Yankel. I use they and them pronouns.
I had to work hard not to say Yankala, but I love it.
You know, you are more than welcome to. I love the diminutive form. Thank you. Very glad to be here. I took my first Kabbalah class earlier this year, and I want more. And then I found this one, and as a trans person, I'm very glad to be here. There's not enough of us who are dipping our toes in, and so I'm happy to be doing this together.
Well, thank you. Leslie, are you still here? I think Leslie sent a message saying that they're going to have to be away for a bit. Are you back? Leslie? I guess not. That's okay. Leora?
I'm Leora. I don't know much about Kabbalah, but I want to learn more. So I might have to leave a bit early, but I'll catch the recording.
Yes, and you will get it. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to I feel like I have to go to dive in and get ready for this. So I know that some of you, maybe a few of you were not here. I just shared in the chat, I shared both like a PDF version and like just a link version Just generally, I said that last time, the benefit of the PDF version is that they have numbers. So all the sources are numbered. Some people find that very helpful. Also something you can download so you can do it anywhere. The link is something you get more flexibility over. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can play around with them. Also, if you have the link and you follow to my profile, so basically at the top where it says my name, if you click on it, it will take you to my profile, and there should be the source sheets of all the other classes we have done as well, if you want to do that. But at the same time, I will also be sharing it on my screen. And like I did the past few times, I don't want to talk the whole time. So that means there are times when I ask for questions, but also at any point, I love if other people read. When you read, you can read in the English, or you can read in what is sometimes Hebrew, sometimes Aramaic. I will say even the Hebrew, it's not a modern Hebrew. So if you learn modern Hebrew in any way or form, it's a very different kind of Hebrew, even when it is Hebrew. But you're welcome to read whichever you want. And we do popcorn style, so whoever volunteers to read, first volunteer, first serve. Let's dive in. But before I do that, so we will have our first text is also just an English kind of text that is very much going to be a recap. It was also on the source sheet last time. We didn't read through it last time, so we'll get through it now. And it kind of does a good recap on a bit of what we had last time. But let me do like a very brief recap of what we did. We basically went through the very basic concept of what Kabbalah is doing. So we talked about the vision that Kabbalah has on the creation of the world, where basically first everything in existence was just the essence of a never-ending, an all-in stuff, a never-ending light, which is basically pure light in which nothing physical could exist. Then we get something called the tzimtzum, which we spoke about last time, where like kind of the divine light is being like extracted or like vacuumed out, removed from a specific space, and all that exists in that space. And then we get to the point where in this empty space, imagine an empty space with no oxygen, and now we want to get a limited amount of oxygen, as in like it shouldn't suffocate anyone. There shouldn't be too much divine light, but there should be enough for people to live. And that's when we get to the first form, the first way of creation, where it's basically a straight line, where there are vessels who need to basically filter through. The example we used last time was if you imagine the light, the sun, the shine of the sun shining through a stained glass window, where it's easier to perceive the light. It's easier for you to look at the shine of the sun if it goes through a shade, so it isn't like blinding you. It's something that's going to come up a lot. I think it's a very the solar eclipse coming up is a good example, maybe to think of it, where like we all want to see, but it's the only time you can actually look directly into the sun is when it's fully covered, like when it's fully hidden under the moon. Otherwise, you need to use special glasses to filter through the light. So that's basically the idea of what we're going to dive into a bit more today, of the 10 Sefirot, the 10 different vessels. In the beginning, there was a problem that it wasn't balanced. In very short, that some of you might remember, we dived into it a bit more. And what happened also that every vessel who got the light, who got the shine, tried to take everything in. They got like blown up like a balloon. And then when they had to like filter it through to the next stage of the filtration system, they collapsed. And that is something that's called the Chevrutah, the breaking of the vessels, through which, even though the light itself was later salvaged and put into the balance form of the 10, what's called the Sefirot, the 10 vessels, there's still a lot left in the world that hasn't been picked up. And how like the idea of Kabbalistic teachings is that our mission in the world is to find those sparks of divinity, find the shine of God, and pick them up in everything that we do. There's a very brief recap of an hour and a half of last time. And we are going to have a bit more in it. If you're not clear yet, let's hold on until we're done with the first source, which is a long one. We're going to read through that, discuss that. And then if there's still any questions, something you don't understand of where we are, we'll have a moment for questions. So I'm going to share my screen. There's another source that we want. Hold on, just... Can everyone see and read everything that's on the screen? Do we need to make it bigger, or are we all good?
Would you mind enlarging it a little bit?
Yeah.
A little would be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, that's good.
Great. I'm just moving it to one side so we can. Great.
I can't see the oh, there we go. Thank you.
And let's get some volunteers. Can I have a volunteer to read the first paragraph? Just the English. Go for it, Amy.
What's right here, the 10 Sephirot?
Yes.
Okay. A Sephirah, plural Sephirot, is a channel of divine energy or life force. This most fundamental concept of Kabbalah is that in the process of creation, an intermediate stage was emanated from God's infinite light to create what we experience as finite reality. These channels are called the 10 Sephirot, 10 divine emanations, 10 divine radiances, 10 divine illuminuses, or 10 divine powers, which are the basic terms and concepts of the inner wisdom of the Torah, which is called Kabbalah.
Thank you. I'm going to zoom out for a second, just for the zoom in, zoom out for just for a second, so we can all see how it works. I'm going to try to get all of it into one. Let's see if I can do this in any way. We got almost all of it. Give me a second. I'm going to zoom out of it. Just for a second, and then I will make it big again, but just while we go through these 10, so we can see them all, because the way they work is also how we understand the balance. So we got the first, if you actually count them, you will actually see that instead of 10, there's 11. But we'll explain that in a second. But basically, as you see it, they work like, in Hebrew, that would be called a segon, or like what a lot of people might maybe know as the Trinity, if I may use steal a term from Christianity. But it's basically, you got a top, and then you got two sides, right, and a left side. And the idea is that then they balance out. So at the top, we have Keter, which literally means crown. It's something we don't talk about. In the Zohar, that is called Almadi Itkasya, the hidden world. It's something that is it's supposed to be, it's basically divinity itself, and it's something that is very hard to grasp for a finite mind. And usually instead, that's why we get that, which we'll get to in a second. Then we get the three upper Sefirot, the three top ones, which are still talking in a world, in a universe where it's hard for us to grasp. And those are wisdom, chachma, bina, which is understanding, and then the balancing out of them is dat, knowledge. Chachma, bina, dat. The acronym of which is Chabad. In case any of you have ever heard that term of Chabad, that comes from chachma, bina, and dat. There's wisdom, there's understanding, and both of them together make a balanced out knowledge. And there's a lot in this in a very like human way. How like sometimes you can have knowledge without wisdom, knowledge without understanding. You can have each one of these on their own, but they are, I think we don't need a lot to understand. That if you have just wisdom, just understanding, just knowledge, you don't have all of them to get a balance out, it leads to disaster. It's like where you get people who say, oh, I'm doing my own research when it comes to medical stuff online. And like maybe you get the knowledge, but do you have the understanding? Do you have the wisdom of a medical doctor? Do you have the understanding? You might have the knowledge, but if you don't have, you need all three of them to balance it out. And then we get to the lower seven, which are also very often called the seven virtues. And these are virtues of the divine. It's something that we all should aim to accomplish in our life. We got chesed, loving and kindness, gevurah, talking of might, and together they create beauty. If you always have loving and kindness, sometimes you need a bit of might. If you only have might without loving kindness, that's really ugly. If you have both together and you balance them out, you get beauty. Then we get netzach, which means victory, hod, acknowledgement, and yesod, foundation. These three are basically a replica of the three before them. It is usually perceived as something that happens a bit more we're closer to our day-to-day lives, closer to our world. We'll explain a bit more of that later, but it's again the same idea. If your focus is only on victory without acknowledging, let's say, the suffering, or if we're talking about a literal war, if you're missing either one of those ideas, you are lacking in foundation. And then we get to Malchut. And Malchut is what's called kingdom, but in a more realistic term, Malchut refers to the world. Malchut is the world that we all live in. So all of those 10 Sefirot are 10 vessels which light, through which virtues get balanced through, ultimately until we reach the world that we are in. We are all living in the kingdom. Kingdom can mean kingdom, state, or the best way to think of kingdom is literally just earth. It's the world that we live in after all those virtues have been balanced out. In addition to all of those, there's also 4 worlds. I think we might talk more a bit about that later, but just to keep those a bit in mind, is the final one of those 4 worlds is called Asiyah, the world of doing, the world of physical things, and that represents Malchut, kingdom. I'm going to go back to full. Again, if there's any questions, that's okay. There's still a lot more to go through that we're going to see now. And I get a volunteer to read the next 2 paragraphs. Joni, go for it. You're muted. Oops. Okay, Joni, you need to unmute yourself. Sorry, you're still muted. Sorry. Okay, there we go.
The above chart shows the traditional form of the Kabbalah, which includes 3 axes, right, middle, and left. For each Sephirah, we have given its Hebrew spelling and its English transliteration on the top line and its English translation immediately below. Although often the Sephirot are enumerated as being 10, there are altogether 11 Sephirot spoken of in Kabbalistic literature. This is because the Sephirah of Keter and Da'at are actually one, representing differing dimensions of a single force. When Keter, which is the superconscience of the soul, manifests itself in consciousness, it transforms itself into the Sephirah of Da'at. In other words, Keter and Da'at are 2 sides of the same coin, a conscious side and an unconscious side. Usually when referring to the 10 Sephirot, one will either count Keter, in which case one does not count Da'at, or vice versa, one counts Da'at, in which case one does not count Keter. Therefore, there are actually only 10 Sephirot, but there are altogether 11 names. Still, many times in various models, all 11 Sephirot are used at once.
This is just like a technical, I think, to get it out of the way. I'm going to read through some of the next ones, and then we'll get more volunteers soon, but I want to get through them a bit faster. The configuration of the Sefirot is graphically depicted in Kabbalistic texts by a vertical array along 3 parallel axes, or kavim, which means lines, each representing a mode of divine influence within creation. This configuration is variously referred to in literature as a sulam, a ladder, an etz, a tree. It's also where the term etz chaim becomes very applicable, or tselem elokim, supernal image of the divine. According to this last designation, the configuration of the Sefirot suggests the form of a human body, because the image of the divine, every human being was created in the image of the divine, which, as recorded in the Bible, was fashioned in the image of God. Hence, each Sefirah is associated with a particular limb or organ which corresponds to its position in the anatomical Sephirotic structure. The interaction between various sefirot is depicted through a network of connecting tzinorot, which are channels. And if some of you remember from last time, we actually had a graph that went through all of those to make it look like a human body as well, if need be. Actually, I can do that right now. Let me actually pull that up from last time so we can all see that. This is from last time, what I'm doing right now, and I just want to scroll down to that graph that we had, where you can also see like the channels connecting it, and you can see how that interacts with the human body. This is like a more complicated version of it. It goes into a lot more details, but you can see how they represent the human body, with the top two representing the mind, the different organs, and kind of like those tzinorot, those pipes, so to speak, that connect them each to the other. Channels which illustrate the flow of the divine. Don, we'll get to questions in a minute, if that's okay. Divine energy throughout creation. These connections suggest various subgroupings of the Sefirot, each reflecting a common dynamic among the Sefirot which they include. As one can see on the chart above, the Sefirot are divided into three triplets of three. There's right, left, middle at three different levels. The first triplet of three of right, left, middle is the triplet of the mind, da'at, or alternatively keter, which we had before, which are chokhmah and bina. So we're talking about knowledge, wisdom, and so on. The second triplet of the inner emotive powers of the heart is of the inner emotive powers of the heart before one begins to act and do things. So we got the mind, we get the heart, which are chesed, like loving kindness, might, and beauty. And these are in the heart. And then we get to the third final triplet is of action, which means of behavioristic characteristic like netzach, hod, and yesod, victory, acknowledgement, and beauty. There are also emotions, but emotions that only become manifest in behavior. The final point of malchut can be viewed as either an appendage of this last subgrouping or an independent entity receiving all of those energies which precede it. Malchut is the final result of product of all of the experiences of the soul, and ultimately the physical world, our physical actions, our physical manifestations. I'm going to skip the next one. Yeah, we don't have to go through all of these, and I think it's just going to get more confusing. I want to start here. Can I get someone to start reading here sequentially? Or actually, let's stop for a second. I know, Don, you had a question. Is there anyone else who had any questions? Yeah, let's stop with the share and we'll get back to this for a second. We're not done yet. So if you have something that you think might be explained in a minute, hold on to it. But if there's something that you really is pressing on you, do let me know now. Anything?
Yes, a quick question. The two that are considered the same to make only 10, which are those in English?
They're keter, crown, and dat, knowledge.
Got it. Thank you.
We're almost there. We're almost there with finishing with the basics. I think everything is going to make a lot more sense. So let's go back to this and let's have someone read now. Okay, sequentially. Any volunteers? Barbara, go ahead. You're muted.
Sequentially, the separate represent the various stages of the creative process whereby God generated from the very core of his own infinite being the progression of created realms, which culminated in our finite physical universe. As a coexisting group, the Sephirot constitutes the interacting components of a single metaphysical structure whose genetic imprint can be identified at all levels and within all aspects of creation.
Gonna do the next one as well?
Yeah, sure. Underlying the purely functional structural aspect of each sephirah is the hidden motivational force, which is best understood by way of comparison to some corresponding psycho-spiritual state of the human soul. Chassidut's exposition of the Sephirot is primarily concerned with articulating these states and exploring the role that they play in man's service of God in this world.
Okay. Before we say anything else, I invite you all to take a breath with me.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I'm going to do a brief recap of what we just read, and then we'll take some questions, and then we'll continue. But basically, everything we have just described is like all those vessels, everything that I feel like we have built up but not dive, and we didn't dive into it enough last time, which is basically, we figured out the problems last time, what's going on, and how the world can exist when there's like this infinite light of the divine, and how everything had to be like, there had to be like a constriction, a restriction of the divine light. And then ultimately, we get these pipes, these tzinorot, these pipes that filter the divine light, and they filtered it through all of those vessels that are at its core human nature, human virtues. And when we balance them out, we reach the ultimate malchut, which is the kingdom of the world, the way we can actually live and live with those sefirot, live with the divine light, live within a world that is God itself. And then we get, and there's a brief mention here to Chassidut, and we'll see that a bit more later. But basically, the way I see it, at least, and the way I see Kabbalah nowadays generally, is that, and the Hasidic teaching specifically, is taking all those ideas that seem very mystical, but ultimately zoom in and focus on how they're just humanity making sense of the world. As far as our minds are concerned, the world is infinite. Yes, we can hypothetically put a time, the world has been around for 14 billion years. We can hypothetically put the universe is, I don't remember exactly, but how many billions of light years across and so on. For all intents and purposes, that is infinite. Our minds are not really capable of grasping what that means. Just to travel to our own galaxy, which is one of the smallest observed galaxy in the universe, at the speed of light, will take millions of years. In a very realistic term, Kabbalah is human beings looking around to being like, what is happening? What is going on? Let's try to make sense of all of this. Let's try to filter it through. And then one of the things that Hasidic teachings get very strongly on is to not separate ourselves from the divine. Something that when you read the early Hasidic teachings, which are basically, as I said last time, I think applied Kabbalah. It's like, we got mathematics and applied mathematics, you got Kabbalah, you got mysticism, and you get applied mysticism, which I will say the Kabbalists have done, like the 16th century Kabbalists, and we'll see later in Tzvat, were very much implementing that in their day-to-day life, but it was something that was supposed to be for a special few like people very. And the Hasidic movement came and said, no, these are things that apply to everyone, and every human being can relate to them. But one of the other things that the Hasidic teachings, again, based on earlier teachings, is something you can find the flavor of it, you can find going back already to the Torah. But they really put it into words, is to not separate ourselves from them. Basically this idea whereas the way most people, at least in the Western world, understand religion, where there's a creator and there who created people, and the people are kind of separated from that. Rather, we are what the Kabbalistic teachings, what the Hasidic teaching is saying, we are all part of this. There's a Hasidic saying, which is God is everything and God is nothing. Because something that is everything is automatically nothing. Because it's everywhere. There's a story, I think it's with the Baal Shem Tov, could have been one of the other Hasidic rabbis, where when he was a child, someone said, I will give you $1 if you can tell me where God is. And he responded, I will give you $1 if you can tell me where God is not. And that includes each and every one of us. One of the literal meanings of the Hebrew word, at least in Kabbalistic teachings, of the Hebrew name for God, which I usually translate to Hashem or Adonai, but the 4-letter word, when you switch around the letters, one of them is Havaya, which means existence, being. Each and every one of us is part of that. We're not separated from God. We're not separated from the divine. We're all part of that, which is why all those attributes that we say that the divine light has to go through, really what we're saying is that we are the divine light. We are that created image of the divine. And this is something that we all go through. Okay. Do we understand ideas? Are there any questions? Anything before we continue? Questions, examples, anything else you want to talk about? Susan, go ahead.
I just missed the word that you said Havaya means. Is that divine?
Havaya, so Havaya is also the same 4 letters as Yud Kei Vav Hei, like the name of God. It's the same letters, and it's like, and according to some linguists, even, it's a very strong possibility that is the literal, like, no one really knows the etymology of the word. So if you look on it, if I may be a heretic for a second, if you look at it from a historical perspective, the God that we call the 4-letter word of God that we use today, the Yud Hey Vav Hey, was one of the many gods in the Canaanite pantheon. Some of which along there were the god El, which the Greeks later very often confused with or conflated with Zeus as in like the main god, and El literally just became to mean God. There was a god Baal, whose name is also very obvious, means the Lord, the boss, the master of everything. The exact etymology of the name of what became known as the Israelite God, as the Jewish God, the God of the Bible, and later the God of Christianity and Islam, it's not very clear, and there's a lot of different opinions, but one of them at least is literally that it means being. It means existence. And in Kabbalah specifically, they talk a lot about that every time the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, which we spoke about last time, a lot, the father of modern Kabbalah, talks a lot about how every time you mention, like when you pray, and you say Baruch Atah Adonai, you say the name of God, you need to, the kavanah has to be Haya, Hoveh, V'yiyah. The one who was, the one who is, the one who will be, which is one of them, which also like is in those letters. Like Haya, Hoveh, and Yiyah are made up from letters that exist, those 4 letters, Yid, Hey, and Vav, Hey. Basically meaning that when we talk about God, we're talking about the sum total of existence, which, believe it or not, as much as we are a fractional part of the universe, we are a part of that existence. And we'll see later, we're going to dive in a bit more in what we discussed last time, how the reason for creation was that the divine wanted to be nice. Some of you might remember from last time, and wanted to do good with the world. In that, looking at it from this lens, from this Kabbalistic lens, it is literally a being itself. It's like basically the same reason why we ever left caves. We don't want to be by ourselves. We enjoy being part. We enjoy nice things to ourselves. We enjoy eating food. It's the reason why we all don't just eat raw food and we add spices and we create nice things from it. We enjoy nice things. And that is the concept of the divine being, like, I want to be good to my creations, which, as we have just discussed, is basically all divinity itself. It's a hard concept to grasp, I know, which is why we get all of those worlds and all of those virtues. But a very easy way to think about it, when you get an urge to do something nice, you meet someone who's going through a hard time, you get an urge to do something nice. That is the divinity within each and every one of us, because chesed, loving kindness, is one of those virtues of the divine, and so on. And already the Talmud talks about that we should be like God, just like God feeds the poor, we should also be feeding the poor, just like God clothes the naked, we should be clothing the naked. That's a quote from the Talmud. We are taking on this role of, in our position, and our role in the world is to do those acts that we learn from our traditions that are acts of God. And when we apply that to our day-to-day lives, all that it's saying is that we are part of that divinity. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions before we continue? Amy, go ahead.
Did the Kabbalists believe that we can achieve balance in Malchut, in the kingdom, the world as we know it, that is possible? Or is it something that it's a sacred thing to strive for that. Like if
Yeah.
when that's achieved, if that's achieved, does that have anything to do with like then the Messiah comes? I don't know.
The
What-
short answer is yes, kind of. Like when they were talking about a world to come, about an ideal world. But even without that, the world, like you remember I said earlier that Malchut is our like physical world, our day to day. The Aleinu prayer, which is traditionally said at the end of every prayer, and has a very famous line, Letaken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to fix the world with the concept tikkun olam. And I mentioned that last time that a lot of people try to be like, because sometimes it feels that progressive Jews like are so focused on tikkun olam, like that is the core of Judaism. Kabbalistically, that is the core of Judaism. That is the core of everything. The goal in the world is to fix the world b'malchut, in the kingdom, in this realistic world. And Shaddai specifically is very often used as one of the names of God, but it comes from, the Talmud says it comes from Misha Amar La'olomo Dai, the one who said to its world enough, which refers to that during creation the world was constantly expanding and God was like enough. And it's the constriction, it is the finite world, and our goal is to create that perfection in Malchut, using Kabbalistic terms, in the reality. To take all of those ideas, to implement them in a realistic world where there's always a perfect balance, where there's no violence, because ultimately we all acknowledge the suffering and then you create a foundation that works for everyone. The goal, tikkun olam, in the Kabbalistic context, literally means creating a perfect world. And we're going to talk a bit about the world to come later, which refers to that, because like this isn't a world to come in the way like Christians, for example, talk about heaven, but rather in Judaism that's called olam haba, which literally just means a world to come. And it's something that we strive for. And like when we talk about the Messiah, we talk about a time, talk about the prophets, when they talk about the Messiah, they talk about this perfect world where wolves and lions live together, where everyone just sits under the trees in peace. I've been thinking a lot about this since October 7th, and like this idea of like, turning your sword into plowshares, and like all of those, like really this idealistic world is possible. It's very hard, and we have to work on it for a long time, but it's perceived as something that we can accomplish. Barbara?
So it's more the world to come in today's reality, as opposed to, after you leave this world.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's definitely a focus of something that we are able to achieve.
Right.
Olam haba, and like we'll see in a minute, because the example that we're going to use on how that applies on a day-to-day life, hopefully we'll get to it, hopefully at least a bit, is going to be Shabbat. And we'll see in a lot of Kabbalistic and Hasidic texts, Shabbat is called Me'en Olam Haba. It's a taste of the world to come. And one of those features for Shabbat is that everyone just has big meals and everyone is rested and you don't have to work and everyone has access to food, because Shabbat also includes, at least in Jewish law, there's an obligation, there's a concept of Tomchei Shabbat, which is one of the highest cherries, considered someone who helps other people bring in their Shabbat, to invite guests into your home. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Barbara.
So, I just kind of came back in my mind to the music that you played in the beginning, which was so exhilarating and celebratory, which is really what we try to create. I think we do create it on Shabbat.
Yeah, so that is the song that I play.
Yeah,
it's from Lecha Dodi. Yeah, it's from Kabbalah Shabbat, which is why, yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much. Yes, you're getting to where I'm getting, and I love this. I love when this happens. You're like pointing Shabbat. Yes, that is exactly what it is. Thank you. Okay, are we good to continue? Okay. We're gonna have someone read the English in a second, but I wanna go to the Hebrew for a minute, if you would allow me to chant it myself, which is V'yeda kol pa'il ki ata fi'alto, v'yavin kol yitzur ki ata yitzarto, v'yomar kol asher neshama bi'apo, Adonai Elahei Yisrael Melech, u'malchuto b'kol meshala. I will just do the translation myself. And everything that has been made will know that you have made it, and it will be understood by everything that was formed, that you have formed it. And they will say, everyone who has breath in his nostrils. Hashem, God of the God wrestlers, that's the way I like to translate Yisrael, is king, and his kingdom rules within everything. It's actually, so this is from Rosh Hashanah prayer. Specifically, it's said in all prayers on Rosh Hashanah, but it's also the final prayer of Malchiyot. The moment in Rosh Hashanah where we talk about Malchut, the kingdom of the divine, and this is the end of the blessing. And in Kabbalistic teachings, these also represent the four different stages. So like the 10 Sefirot that we had are divided into 4 different stages, from going from more in idea, from knowledge, to literal creation, to the final moment where everything understands that we're all part of this divinity. And what's very interesting here, the last line, Malchuto Bakol Meshala, Malchut, the kingdom, it doesn't say, in Hebrew, if it wanted to say that the kingdom of God rules above everything, or rules everything, it will be Malchuto Al Kol Meshala. Your kingdom rules on everything. Instead, it says Bakol, within everything. Everything that exists is part of that kingdom, specifically when we're talking about the literal world. And there's a lot more to that line. And like Kabbalistically, this line is the most important, one of the most important lines of Rosh Hashanah prayers. And like the community where I come from, which is where the song that you heard earlier, this is an extremely powerful moment with a unique tune at every prayer. And these 2 lines can sometimes take 5 minutes to get through during prayers. As like with all the chants and everything that it comes. But I want to bring this home a bit. And we want to, and we're going to use Shabbat as an example of how that translates into our day-to-day life. So I want to start with a quote from the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, in the tractate of Shabbat, but one that specifically talks about 2 people that later became very important figures in the Kabbalistic movement. Rabbi Shimon, who is also called Rabbi Shimon ben Yechawi, the Rashbi, someone who's buried in the village of Miron in Israel, and his son Rabbi Elazar. Later, when the Zohar was written, which historically was only written 1,000 years after they have passed away, it was attributed to those figures. And in the Zohar, they are constantly mentioned and quoted, and they become whether or not they actually wrote it or actually created, which historically they probably didn't, that's besides the point. They become the figureheads. They become the people that Kabbalah relies on. And this is a story where they are kind of like, with everything that we have just had, and we're all feeling like we're floating a bit, and all of those ideas, this is kind of a moment where they're being brought down to earth. So the story goes that this was during the Roman occupation of what the Romans called like Roman Palestine, or like this is like we're talking here the 1st and 2nd century, at like about 100 years after the destruction of the temple. And there's the story where there was a meeting of rabbis, and Rabbi Shimon, this rabbi, went and was talking very bad of the Romans. And he was saying that all of the good things they supposedly do, they all do it for their own good. Basically, I encourage you, if any of you have time, to look up this story in Shabbat, in the Talmud. It's a very strong takedown of colonialism, and a very strong takedown of like empires generally, who supposedly build big projects, but the goal isn't really the good of the people. And then, so basically, in order to survive, they ran away and they hid in a cave. The Talmud tells the story. They went and hid in a cave, and for 12 years they were hidden in a cave. There is a cave in Israel today, in the northern parts, that people say was the cave where they were. Whether or not that is true, I don't know, but that's how the story goes. And there was a tree of something that I have no idea how it's called in English, chaluvin, or it's called bakser. It's like a tree that creates these fruits that are kind of very hard and stiff and kind of hard to eat, but you can supposedly survive on them. And that's all they ate for 12 years. And this is the moment where they come out from that cave. And while they were there, at least according to the Kabbalistic tradition, this is when they got from Elijah, from the prophet, and directly from God, they got all the Kabbalistic teachings. And then they emerge. Does someone want to read this? Any volunteers? Jody, go ahead.
They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, these people abandon eternal life of Torah study and engage in temporal life for their own sustenance. The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave." They again went and sat there for 12 months. They said, "The judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time." A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." They emerged. Everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world, as the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah."
But this is it's a very interesting moment. It's something we find a lot in the Talmud. But basically, they're these people who have spent 12 years purely in relationship with the divine. To talk about Kabbalistic standards, they were directly tuned in to that infinite light, and they couldn't grasp the concept that people are in this world doing earthly things. They come out and they use their, like, Don, I think you said you're trying to vanquish your enemies. That's what they did. They used their Kabbalistic power to vanquish everything. Like, what do you mean you're plowing? They looked at them and they burned them. But this is where the powerful moment happens. You would think they are thinking of pure spirit. They are thinking of a pure world. And God was like, excuse me? Can you, like, stop? Like, what are you doing here? Is that why you came out? Like, go back where, literally, this is like God being like, go back to where you came from. Like, stop doing what you're doing. This is the moment, this is a moment, which later the entire Kabbalistic movement gets built on. People who were taught, they had to be taught that spirituality isn't everything. But you think that you need to get above the world? That's not what we're talking about. Living within the world. That is the power. That's where we get Malchut. The kingdom is literally in the day-to-day lives. There's another part, so I didn't want to go into all of them, but there's a moment where right after that, Rabbi Elazar still is like, his father still has to heal everything that he destroys. And then they see a person, it was on a Friday before Shabbat, and they see a person running around and holding two branches of myrtle branches, which smell really nice. And they asked him, what are you doing? Where are you going? And he said, I have these for Shabbat, and one of them is for, the Torah talks about remembering Shabbat and keeping Shabbat, and I have this one for each. And that was a farmer. It was a person who was basically toiling in the ground, like someone who was connected to the ground, and that was kind of what calmed them down. And that later becomes, again, also a very intense Kabbalistic thing, but I didn't want to go into that. But the point being, this is where they are being told to come down. These are the people that Kabbalah later came and grounded themselves on. Your mission in life isn't to be holy in a cave and isolated from the world. That's not interesting. If you just do that and then you want to go and destroy everyone who isn't doing that, God really will tell you, like, get back to where you came from. The point is to be able to live with all of that. And this is where I want to do this text. So this is a Hasidic text from a Rebbe, probably one of the most well-known Hasidic Rebbes, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. For our new Shul people, for any of you who were with us on the high holidays, you might remember Rabbi Misha and myself as well, teaching about some of the stories of Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman was a great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, of the founder of the Hasidic movement, and a very interesting, someone who accomplished a lot. He was 36 years old when he passed away, and like has written a lot and started a movement that still is very powerful to this day. And a lot of his works are basically taking Kabbalah and bringing it down to earth. So this is a quote which very much ties into what we had last time, of like the reason why anything exists, but specifically to talk about those worlds. Does anyone want to read this one? Anyone who hasn't read, who wants to read? even the people who don't have their videos on, you can just unmute yourself and read. Susan,
I can read.
Oh, go for it, Yankel. Yankla.
God created the world as a consequence of his compassion. For they wanted to reveal their compassion, and if creation had not taken place, to whom would they have shown their compassion? They therefore created the entire creation from the inception of Atzilut all the way down to the center point of the corporeal world in order to display their compassion.
Thank you. I love that you changed. I didn't write it, but the translations that I use gender neutral pronouns from the translation that was in Sefaria. But it's coming back to this point. Like and in Hebrew it's even stronger. Atsof nukudat hamerkas shel olam hagashmi. The point, the central point of the physical world, that exists because of divine compassion. In the most imagined, the most earthly, the most physical, the most central part of the physical world, I don't know, or like what people say, the most imagine a point in the world that is the furthest away from spirituality. That was created because God has compassion. That everything that exists is for that compassion. And talking of that, and it's going to go a bit further away, but this is going to bring it home, and we're getting to a point where we're going to have to wrap up, so we're going to do that anyway. But I want to do one other thing, something that I mentioned both in the Hasidic through Modern Lens class, and here also will make a lot of sense. Yes, Barbara, go ahead.
Could you just mention what is Atzilut?
So I mentioned it a few times. I don't want to go into that because this is like a whole session on its own. But the SS Chevrutah are kind of fall, in addition to the 10 vessels, there are kind of 4 worlds, which are called Atzilut, Beri'ah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Atzilut is the highest level. So kind of the 3 of knowledge that we had at the beginning, Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat, those all fall into Atzilut. Atzilut literally means in Hebrew also la atzil, it's the point in the mind where things originate. So if you imagine like to think of it in a way of as a creator, as someone, let's say, who creates something physically, let's say you were an architect. Atzilut would be the idea that you have in your head, and that would be the first part. And then you get Beri'ah, which is creating, which would be hypothetically writing down your idea. And then you get Yetzirah, which would be like getting all the materials together to build it. And then you get Asiyah, the physical creation of it. And those are those 3 things. So like we're talking, Atzilut refers to the idea, the knowledge, the first 3 that we had. So basically what he was saying is that everything from the beginning, from its inception, all the way down to the most physical, to the grossest physical earthly thing, everything is because of the compassion and at the core of the divine. So the next one to me is something that is very important to me as someone who hates commandments. I hate being told what to do. I hate to think of like I tell people whenever someone asks me if I'm observant, I say I'm not observant at all. I celebrate Judaism. I don't observe. I'm not religious. I celebrate. I relate to it. And this Zohar is a big part of that. And I don't know if there's anyone who wants to read it. Come on, people. Susan, go ahead.
For we have learned 613 kinds of advice as the Torah given to humanity, so that they can be fulfilled with their divine. For their divine desires only to do them good on this world and on the world to come.
Yay, we get the world to come again. But very importantly, and this is something that the Zohar talks a lot about, traditionally there are, in Hebrew, they are called Tariach Mitzvot, 613 commandments. Maimonides goes on and talks about them. Every commandment, everyone talks at different ways of counting them, but traditionally there are 613 commandments. The Zohar doesn't have 613 commandments. Kabbalah doesn't have 630 commandments. They have no commandments whatsoever. They have pieces of advice. The way they see this is that our goal is to be fulfilled and the word that I use there, I couldn't really think of a way to translate that better, but it's mare. One of the ways of translating is like your own master, to be like fully part, to be fully fulfilled. I translated that to divine because I don't love the term master, but it's like, this is a very personal message. It's not saying the master, it's not saying the divine, but your divine specifically. This is talking about you, mare. It's not saying like it would be like in the Aramaic, it would be like if it was just like, it would be like the last hey, the last letter would be missing if we were just talking about a lord, a master, but rather with your own master. And basically what this is, the way this is seeing all the mitzvot, all the commandments, everything that we do in this world is not because, I don't know, there's a king who has laws, there's a government who decided to make laws, and there's this a language we hear sometimes from certain religious people in different religions talk about what does God want, and God wants that, and God had this mind because God said so. Rather, the way they see the Torah is pieces of advice on how you can be fulfilled with it. How, like, we have established that the divine has created anything, and basically we are, everything that exists is to be good, is to do good in the world, for you to have joy, for you to have pleasure, for you to be fulfilled on this world, and by doing that, you are going to reach the world to come. And that is the goal of everything. So if we were thinking of how to implement that in our day-to-day lives, this is one good piece of advice that I think we understand the context of right now. And I will say personally, as a person and as a rabbi, this is the way I approach Judaism as a whole. And I think we can, each and every one, when you really understand it, you can do that. When I think of Shabbat, I don't think of what am I obligated to do. I think, what is Shabbat at its core about? It's about a day of rest. It's about a day of joy, or like in Hebrew called Yom Menucha Ekdusha, a day of rest and holiness. What do I need to do? What are the pieces of advice that I need to do for me to reach that? What is going to bring me to that moment of what Shabbat is supposed to be? When I think about prayer, I think of what do I need to be for prayer to really feel like it's a piece of a device for me to feel fulfilled with the divine, which ultimately is each and every one of us. It's something that you can do in your day-to-day life, because it's very easy to look on Judaism and think like, oh, I'm thinking like Passover is coming up. And you can think and look on all the different rules. What can I eat? What can I not eat? What can I do? Instead, just twist it around a bit. Think of Pesach, think of Passover as pieces of advice. It's supposed to be a moment of celebrating our days of freedom. Pesach is a man Chevrutah, our season of freedom, a season of joyous freedom. And yes, there are traditions that are meant to help us feel that. There is this idea of be conscious about what you eat. Maybe don't eat everything. Because when we start to understand that food has certain restrictions to certain people, it helps us be grounded and be part of the world, and so on. But, and I encourage you, like each and every, like if there's a part in Judaism that you want to do, but you're struggling with it because you don't feel like it has a meaning to you, or you feel like there's too many details, think of it as a piece of advice as opposed to something you're obligated to do. Think of Shabbat as a piece of advice. Think of a holiday. Think of food, or what you can and can't eat, as pieces of advice to ground you, to be fully part of that divinity, which is everything in the world. Think of Judaism as a whole, of all 613 commandments, as 613 pieces of advice to reach that tikkun olam, to reach that better world.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
I really dig what you're saying. I mean, I think it's really, I really resonate toward it. But then why do we need, or maybe it's, you know, I always thought that like the masters, whoever they were, that gave all this wisdom and pieces of advice, whether they be divine or from outer space or all of these different theorems that sort of cross over and stuff like that. Why are they differentiated in such a a specific way. I mean, there's them and there's us. I mean,
What do you
if
mean
we're
them?
part of all of this, why do we, what is the separation?
I'm not sure I get what do you mean the separation?
What is the separation between those who are striving to achieve being better human beings for whatever reason? I mean, religion is usually what keeps people in line, right?
Mhm.
But it's, I mean, it's supposed to be more nourishing than that, than just being kept in some kind of rigid formation. It's supposed to be an enlightenment that allows us to go on and to kind of like be inhabited by and inhabit that light.
Yeah.
So then what is the separation between us and that light? I mean, why is Putin the way he is, or Trump the way he is? You know, I'm putting it in really crass terms.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, I'm babbling, but
Well, basically, the way the Kabbalists understand it is so. First of all, let me say something. Like the Zohar is actually known when they talk about, like for example, the earlier translation that we had that it gave like that the Torah has given to people. The Zohar, compared to most other like traditional texts, doesn't even talk about Jews specifically. It uses the term Barnash, which literally means the children of woman, which is basically all of humanity.
Balina.
Bar Nash, which means which is Aramaic for literally it's the son of woman, basically the children of woman, aka all people in the world. And that is supposed to be everyone. I mean, it's a big part of like the Shevira, like the breaking of the vessels that we had earlier, which is the way the Kabbalists understood the bad things. That in short, there are broken things in this world. And no, we haven't figured out how to. There are unfortunately bad people, or like people who do. Let me rephrase it. I think there are people who do bad things,
right,
in part because they are part of those broken vessels. And ideally, everyone would be good. Ideally, everyone would start with but without even putting it off on other people, each and every one of us has good things that we do and bad things, and we do bad things, and that's okay. Because the idea is to thrive. We are still in this world. We haven't reached that world to come, in part because of all those bad things that exist. And those exist. We're not denying it. Kabbalah is not ignoring it. Just the opposite. Our goal in the world is to do our work to uplift that. It's to do our world the best we can, to show up on the streets, or as Rabbi Heschel would say, to pray with our feet. And all of that is a big part of it is exactly that, to try our best to correct what's wrong in the world. And there isn't a separation as in the sense I'm good and you are bad, or this doesn't apply. This applies to everyone. There are people who do more bad things and people who do less bad things. But the goal is to do our part. The short answer is there are bad things and there are bad people who do bad things, and we just got to do our best to do our part for good.
So then this would demand that at some point we would reach a state of synchronicity where everybody is doing their best.
That is the idea. That is the very strong wishful thinking that we're hoping to achieve. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, you know what impresses me so much about this whole idea of what you said, advice rather than commandments. And if God is everything, and there's no separation with God, at the same time, there's a sense of the individual as being important enough, powerful enough, respected enough in a sense, not to be just told they have to do things in a way that they are empowered they empower themselves in that they're not just, follower of some other power. So there's that sense of separation sort of embedded, inherent in there all the time, at the same time as unity.
Yeah.
Right, yes, it's an incredibly perplexing duality that exists,
Right.
And the goal is to understand that that doesn't have to exist. Let's put it this way. Does that make sense, Susan?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
But right, like instead of being told how to, you must do it this way, and then the commandment or the prescription can, people know more. The danger is people could know more about the rule than the why. And so what you were saying, Susan, about respect for the individual, like if we're striving to reflect or embody God, we need to be creative. That's so much of what it is all about. So if we're just following, okay, this is what I have to do, as opposed to, okay, here's where I understand I'm trying to get to, what will work for me to get myself there.
Yeah, if we strive to be, and if we understand that we are all part of the divine, one of the names for the divine, and the most common one, is the creator, the one who constantly creates. And like in morning prayers, there's a line, "Hamachadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit," the one who renews in their goodness every day the creation of the beginning, the Genesis. Like it's something that repeats every day, and it's something that we do every day, and it renews every day. And being creative is being close to the divine. The Ari, like the Korean and Kabbalistic teachings generally, and so more even in Hasidic teachings, they talk a lot about how, like, the world of creation, Olama Asiyah, the world, like they see there's a lot of divine worlds, and the word of creation is some of the highest and some of the closest to that figure of the divine. So yes, in many ways you can see Kabbalah as the antithesis to orthodoxy as a whole. And I'm not talking about the Orthodox movement, I'm talking like the concept of orthodoxy, the concept that something doesn't change. And we had that a lot in our Hasidism class, where like the Hasidic teachings are literally like in every generation there's new interpretations, and that's the point. That's the beauty of it. That is being part of that.
But isn't it also with, let's say, when you think about someone like Putin, there are people who are focused on the external. There's no interiority. There's no connection to the internal. There's no capacity for compassion or identification with what's inside another.
Yeah. Or seeing an other as like the concept of it. I think like we keep using Putin as an example, so I will keep going with that. But you keep thinking about that, and this concept of like, I'm just thinking of like one of the things that he constantly would say is that trying to deny that Ukraine has a right to exist or that it's its own thing, but rather that it's just part of Russia. It's just part of us. Like the inability to see an other and that they have the right to be different. And that doesn't really mean this is like, I imagine this as like a curving like mountain where like we need to first recognize that everyone is very different and we can be like very separate. And then when you reach the peak of understanding that everyone is different, then you can start to understand that we're actually all the same. But we're all the same, not because we're not different, but we are different, but we just ultimately come together to the reality of we're all different manifestations. I had a teacher used to use an example, I think I might have mentioned that last time, that like, what I mentioned at the beginning of today, like the stained glass example, right? And you get the same light that shines through, but ultimately, if it's a stained glass that has different colors, you end up having a red shadow and a blue shadow and a purple shadow and a maroon shadow. Like you get all of these different colors, and they are different. And that's the beauty of it. But at the core, they're all the same. It's all coming from the same light. It's just the manifestation of it is different. which at the core is what those feed us. Like those different worlds are not really different. They're different manifestations of the same light. They're different manifestations of the same thing. And that is the same. I use that a lot when I think about diversity. It's not just that I don't think diversity separates us from each other. It's when we really understand that people have unique colors, unique shades, unique experiences, is when you can really realize that at the core, it's coming from the same place. We don't have to all look the same to be the same, but rather, if we would force everyone to look the same, that you would actually get in the way of everyone being the same. Does that make sense? I know it's a bit of a hard statement, but everyone is the same, as in everyone is part of that divine. Everyone is fully their manifestation of the divine when we recognize that there are different shades. It's just like go back to our stained glass. If I would walk in and be like, I only recognize the blue color, then you are ignoring a big part of the light that you have. The only way that you are going to see the full picture and you are going to fully see the same light from the same source is when you recognize all the different colors. We are seeing the world is going through a lot of shades, and those are basically the Sephiroth. And if you're going to ignore some of those shades, or you're going to try to be like, I only want to focus on the blue shades and not on the red shades, you are ignoring some of those, because some people go through that filter. And those filters on a more like humanistic level could be like our experiences. And I mean, you also get into the whole question of nature versus nurture and like all of that, but it's basically because of our experiences and because of the reality of the world, we each have different experiences and we each develop in different ways. So we each develop different shades and colors. But the only way to really see everyone is by seeing those differences. And then we see. Yeah, I love what you said. Nothing is everything. Difference is sameness. Yes. Yes. And that's with everything. I mean, that is scientifically true. If you're going to start like the only way that scientists were able to achieve splitting of the atom, getting everything down to its atoms even, is by realizing that different things are made up of different molecules that are created differently. At its core, it's all the same. You start breaking down, we all break down to everything in the world is made of the exact same material. But you could only get to that point if you first see the different makeups of everything. It sounds like
And
a lot.
that's where the part about compassion really comes in, is being able to assimilate those differences as part of yourself. I mean, I'm not saying, Putin and Trump are the personifications of evil, although they may sometimes give us that impression. But I mean, yeah, somewhere there are people in there, but those are the ones that really trouble me, and those are the kinds of quandaries that have always interested me. Like I had a boyfriend once who had just gotten out of prison, and he was like a maniac, and all I wanted to do was treat him with kindness and see where that would get me. And it did get me places for a while, but after a while I had to just kind of, take it back and be there for myself. But I mean, these are experiments that I've always kind of taken part in with myself as self challenges of being with people who are so different than myself, and really understanding how we fit together in this complex universe, and sometimes it's an okay experiment, and other times it can be extremely painful, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which isn't a reason to abandon the experiments, but it is, I suppose, a reason for caution in how one distributes one's compassion and passion.
We are out of time, so we're gonna wrap it up here. There are more tracks in that we didn't get to, which specifically focus on Shabbat and like seeing like Shabbat as a bride that is the queen, that's kingdom. I wish we had more time to discuss that and dissect that. Our next session, I think Susie said April 16th. And that will be like a final move. We'll focus a bit more on taking the ideas into our day-to-day lives. But for now, we're going to wrap up here. Thank you all so much for being here. And if I hope to see some of you on Purim. So we're doing like our on Saturday night, the new Shul, look up. You should go to the website. It's going to be a play that Rabbi Misha wrote. I will be there and do some of the Megillah and some of the story parts. It's gonna be a great time. But have a happy Purim. And yeah, let's try to keep seeing the world as one. It's hard, but we can do it. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Good night.
Night. Thank you. Good night.